Hello ladies and gentlemen, hope you guys are all doing exceptionally well. This marks the second video that we've done on Warframe, which is a video game that I'm really enjoying at the moment. And I'm going to be adjusting some of the older Warframes in this series for as long as I may do it. And today we're going to be looking at Atlas. I believe at a fundamental level that a lot of the Warframes of old, even though they've received reworks and tweaks, are just a bit outdated, especially when looking at things like the helmet system and taking some of the best abilities from some of the great Warframes and putting them onto other Warframes. So in this series, I want to tweak around some of the abilities while still kind of preserving what the design ideology was for these Warframes. I'm not looking to drastically change the abilities. I'm just looking to redistribute some resources and maybe add some additional effects that I think could be beneficial in the sandbox here today of 2025. So, with that being said, we're going to be talking about Atlas today. I've already done a video on Ash, and to be honest with you, I didn't change that much about Ash. I just added a few different things and tweaked his passive ability, and I think it brings him together quite nicely. Atlas here, we will be going into as well. So let's take a look at his abilities. We're going to be looking at passive, all four skills, and then also the augment mods available for any of the abilities that are relevant. This will be a bit longer because Atlas has a lot of augment mods. We will also discuss helmet abilities as well where appropriate. A lot of these are relatively inoffensive, but where appropriate, if Warframe is giving this particular ability to any other Warframe, then we need to address that as well, because it needs to be either a little bit more seriously looked at, because who knows how the spaghetti code of different Warframes could affect this. Anyway, let's go into Atlas's passive, which at base is just, he becomes immune to knockdown effects while he is on the ground. I believe this passive is completely fine. The amount of people who this passive affects, realistically, is everyone. It's a big meme in build videos to have prime sure-footed or handspring or something of that nature. I believe this is just completely fine, especially with Atlas. You will be on the ground, sliding around so much. Pardon me. This passive, though, I believe, is lacking something. It is lacking the mention of his rubble mechanic. That passive, which is a passive ability, is tied to his 3. I believe that doesn't make sense, especially because his 3 is Petrify, is his subsume, but the other Warframes, as far as I'm aware, can't benefit from rubble. It's just Atlas. Even when we look at the wording, I know we're breaking information flow a little bit here, but when shattered, petrified enemies drop healing rubble for Atlas. It literally does not work on other Warframes, but that is what his subsume is. I just want to point it out. I think that should be moved to his passive, and I will tell you why. It is because we're going to be leaning into the petrification mechanic throughout all of his abilities, not just his third ability. His passive ability has an augment mod. His augment mod is Rubble Heap. And as you can see here, by the way, the passive, it does mention rubble here in the passive ability, but it's not mentioned in the game. And I'm like, put it in the passive ability. Just say that defeating petrified enemies drops healing rubble for Atlas, increasing his armor. That's it. That's all you need to say. We don't need to say that it's up to like 1,500 or whatever it is, just that. Moving on to his augment mod. His augment mod states that while above 1,400 rubble, which by the way is 100 less than his maximum, so just so that we're all aware about that, Landslide, his first ability, costs no energy, deals twice as damage, and travels twice as fast. Great augment mod, to be honest with you. Great augment mod. Nothing to really talk about there. That's a great augment mod. Being able to stay above that threshold and being rewarded for it, especially because his 1 is probably the ability most people build him for. Incredible, no changes. Again, I just think that the description of defeating petrified enemies drops rubble should be moved into his passive properly in the game. Let's go into his 1, his Landslide. Bash enemies with an explosive sliding punch, repeated up to 3 times for a combo attack. Each hit in the 3-hit combo increases the radius of the attack. Energy cost is reduced with each hit of Landslide, and this is also an exalted melee, which you can mod to do other things as well. So it's a very interesting ability. It's very fun to use, but there is one glaring weakness to this ability, and that's that the range at which you target enemies cannot be modded. The explosion radius can. If we have a look at the ability here, you see first punch, second punch, and third punch. The meter thing that it's mentioning there is the explosion radius. So 4 meters, 6 meters, and 8 meters refers to specifically how far the explosion radius is. So there versus over there. Like that's the difference we're talking about here. And it is so unfortunate, because what it also means, if I just reset this little test here, is that you cannot go slipping and sliding across the ground. Like if we have a look here, if we mark this enemy from 20 meters away, right? And let's see, I'm pretty sure it's around 12 meters, okay? Around 12 meters that we were able to grab someone. Now you may think, that's not bad, like 12 meters is fine. I would like to be able to target someone and zip across the map towards them if I have modded for it. And this particular ability cannot be modded for its targeting range. And I just think that's such a wasted opportunity. So again, we're at 20 meters, 19, 18, 17. So this should definitely be within range by now if we have a stretch mod. We come to that 12 meter threshold, so cannot be modded. But the explosion radius can. This explosion radius is definitely bigger as a result of range, but again, I want to be able to target enemies from further away. That's kind of my main gripe with this ability. I would like this ability to be able to be targeted from further away. Otherwise, the fact that it has ability combo and all that, I think is great. I think that's awesome. His first ability has an augment as well. Now, of course, technically his passive ability, Rubble Heap, also augments his first ability, but let's have a look at the augment here. Landslide augment, leave a trail for 12 seconds that petrifies enemies for 6 seconds. I think this is generally fine, especially, think about this, if we increase the targeting range. Because again, you may not think about, oh, well, I'm thinking about going back on myself, but I think this is a really interesting augment for, say, like endless missions where you're kind of moving around in like a similar area. Probably not as much if you're going through an exterminate or a capture, but then again, that's fine. You're probably also not accumulating a lot of rubble in those game modes either. But this then would mean that the distance that you slide for your landslide would positively affect this augment, because there would be a larger trail. And that could be really, really good, especially if maybe the width of that trail was scaled with the range as well. I don't know. But I think at least for the duration side of things, having this big patch of petrification would be awesome, because if you can imagine this, like maybe slowed them over time or petrified enemies over time or whatever it may be. I'm not specifically certain how the petrification works from this augment, but I just think this augment is fine if we look at it in the context of this is probably an endless mission kind of joint, and also if the range of that matters, because at present, Atlas's targeting range is 12 meters, and he can explode things in almost 14 meters around him. So there's no real interplay there, and I think that's a wasted opportunity personally. So I think this ability is kind of fine, this augment is fine, if we just tweak that he can target things from further away. That's my personal preference, that's my thing. Anyway, on to his second ability, Tectonics, which is, oh my gosh. Now, I have my own opinions about this ability. I think, personally, the wall into roll aspect is kind of unnecessary. I think it'd be cooler if he was like an earthbender. That's why I've dressed mine like an earthbender, where it just summons a rolling boulder. I think that would be fine. But to preserve the design identity that Atlas has, summoning the bulwark and then making it roll, I would like it if this bulwark, as it was attacked, dropped rubble, and when you send it rolling, it would also, so for those who are unfamiliar, by the way, you summon a bulwark, which has health, and then you send it flying. And at base, it just summons a bulwark, crashes towards the enemies, and it damages enemies with slash, which is odd instead of something else, based on the health it has lost. I think that's a terrible way of scaling this ability. This ability should be used to generate rubble. I think that it being attacked should generate rubble because it should break apart. And I also think that when it rolls, it should generate rubble based on how many enemies it crashes through, and then have a standardized amount that it does when it explodes. I think that would be great, and I think that would make this really, really awesome, because then you could have, a wall if you really want to, and also then you can just fold it down and send it rolling, and it will create rubble, and that way you can have If you're running through a mission, you can create that, roll it through like a bunch of enemies, and you'll get your rubble as you're running. In endless missions, this probably less necessary, but it still works. It has an augment mod. The augment mod for tectonics states that tectonic fracture, you can create up to 3 walls. They have twice as much health, but they can no longer be turned into boulders. So this augment mod it buffs the worst part of this. We don't need to create 3 walls. So I have a proposed change to this augment mod. This augment mod instead creates 3 walls on cast. 1 in front of you, 2 to the sides of you. When you recast those walls, they all either roll outwards from wherever you're standing, or we could have it, they all roll towards your point of view, like towards your reticle. I think that makes it so much better, because if we have it so that the walls already drop rubble based on how many enemies they roll through, and then you make 3 walls instead of just 1, you are just going to generate a heap load, pun intended, of rubble. And I think that's a great idea. I also think that it's interesting if you have them roll outwards like in all directions, but I think it's probably more useful if you have them all roll like towards your point of view. I even thought it could be really interesting if when you landslide his first ability and you just happen to like move through the same area that your boulder would, if like you just created like a massive explosion or something, but that's pedantic. So I do think it would be cool. I think it'd be really synergistic, and I think it could be awesome. And that's just me personally. I think it would mean that people would potentially use the rolling mechanic a lot more. Or even if you could just like target your walls with your landslide, and it would like create a massive explosion when you hit them. I think that'd be awesome personally. But that's just me. In any case, I think changing this ability fundamentally to produce rubble is the correct choice. And additionally, we could even make it so again, the augment mod, wherever it rolls, creates the path of statues thing that landslide has. We could do that as well. I think it's unnecessary. I think leave path of statues for landslide, leave this for this. And I know I said in the beginning that it was going to be leaning into petrification. Sorry, what I meant by that was the rubble. I completely just got my wires crossed there. In any case, Petrify, 3rd ability, an actually really buffed ability from when I first remember it. This hardens Atlas's gaze to fossilize foes, increasing the damage they take. It also heals the 4th ability and creates petrified bulwarks. Now this is interesting, because they've given this ability so many things to compensate for a lot of other things. So if we cast Petrify on this, it petrifies the bulwark, which makes it stronger and all that kind of good stuff. We don't care about that. It's literally not matter at all. So here's how I want to look at this ability. Here's how I'd like to change it. I think Petrify, in a similar capacity to how Octavia, I think it is, has a bit of a reset on like casting one of her abilities. I think that's her. I don't quite remember exactly. But I know there's a Warframe that has abilities. Oh, no, it's Gara. Sorry. When Gara, I know this is breaking information flow, but when Gara has Splinter Storm active, it's her defensive ability, and then casts her 4th ability, it resets the timer on Splinter Storm, and that's important because it can accumulate damage. I think something similar could happen here with Petrify, where Petrify resets the duration of Rumblers. I think that could be an interesting thing. I think that if it does reset the duration of Rumblers, maybe it doesn't heal them. This is a controversial take, I know, but I think that could be interesting, and we'll get into why that could be when I talk about the Rumblers specifically, but I think the Rumblers should be more of a, they break apart, and I think that's the idea, is Atlas's abilities summon rocks which break apart and create rubble for him. In any case, breaking information flow. Atlas should also then have the strengthened bulwarks should apply to the bulwarks. I think that's absolutely fine, and especially now that we've changed them, I think that casting Petrify on, and actually this is what I really like, is, you know how I mentioned the path of statues? I think if you petrify a wall and then you make it roll, I think that should obtain the path of statues augment, basically. And you may think that could be an augment itself. Fair enough. But I think that should be part of like the base kit, is that when you cast Petrify, it makes, it heals or resets the timer on Rumblers. It, pardon me, makes enemies vulnerable to damage. That's appropriate because again, this is his sub-zoom ability and it needs to be more useful than just focusing entirely on Atlas's kit. So I think the damage vulnerability is great. It strengthens bulwarks, making sure that they will like increase the amount of rubble they produce. I think that's awesome. And I also think that destroying petrified enemies should drop rubble. Now that is something that I think should be part of the passive ability, technically. Because I think then if we have, now I know I'm kind of moving the information around a bit here. If we have petrify saying we're petrifying enemies, but then we have these changes where if you strengthen a bulwark, the bulwark creates the Path of Statues, and then we also have the Path of Statues augment, we now have this passive ability where destroying petrified enemies generates rubble, or generates additional rubble. I think that works. You could also say that could be just part of the petrified thing. I think it's unnecessary, especially considering that this ability is supposed to be going on other frames, and all that information just bloats the text box. So I don't think it's necessary. And I think that's fine. I think that's great. I think, again, to go from the top, it fossilizes enemies, increasing the damage they take. It either heals or resets the duration of rumblers. It creates petrified bulwarks, which will have the Path of Statues augment basically applied to them. And that when enemies are destroyed that are petrified, they drop rubble. Peak cinema, incredible. Path of Statues has an augment ability as well, and it's just one of those augment abilities. It has a chance to scan enemies into the codex, or enemies petrified are scanned in the codex. Sorry, my window, I'm just closing it because the rain has just come in. And also have a 25% additional chance to drop loot, sorry. And I think that's great. I think that's fine. It's one of those abilities. I think you could also make the Path of Statues case here as well as an augment mod, but I think that should just be part of the base kit. That's me personally. And finally, let's talk about Atlas's Rumblers. So you summon 2 elemental stone brawlers who do melee damage. Summoning in proximity to enemies petrifies them, and when they've finished their duration, they will, by the way, this is petrify. It creates this effect of petrification, the stone over the enemies, and if you destroy them, they drop rubble, which you can pick up. But for this as well, you can see they get petrified when you summon the Rumblers, and the Rumblers will just attack. So that's Rumblers. They have a long duration, but they don't usually last long because they get destroyed. So what I think should happen with the Rumblers specifically, and this is really interesting for Rumblers, is that I think the petrification on cast, absolutely fine. Again, it synergizes with the rest of the kit really, really well. I think that Rumblers should create rubble when they are like being attacked, like it's chipping away at them, or potentially when they attack enemies as well, like it breaks off. I think when they get attacked is better because I don't think they're really that great of a summon, but I think that still adds a lot to Atlas's kit with the whole mechanics of all of this, with like petrification and the rubble and everything like that. I also think that potentially that when they die, they could create a bulwark without being like an augment mod. I think that could be really interesting if when the Rumblers like become destroyed, they become a bulwark. I'm not sure why we haven't thought of that before, but I just wanted to put it out there. And that will then allow you to like roll the bulwark and get the rubble, etc., etc. Again, I just think that we don't need the Rumblers to crumble into a pile of rubble if every other ability is obtaining like a bit more power by creating rubble. Because again, if we have the ability to create rubble on his petrified enemies, and that's kind of it, and like landslide with the augment, and like Rumblers when they die, like we're preparing for like the worst case scenario. So I think taking that the Rumblers create rubble when they perish and just putting that onto all of his other abilities and going, okay, when the Rumblers finish their duration, they crumble into a bulwark, which you can then roll away. I think that's a great idea. That gives you, when the Rumblers run out of duration, it gives you two bulwarks, which will give you armor by creating rubble. I think that's a great idea. This is the interesting thing though. This ability has like 2 augment mods, yes. So we'll talk about Rumble first. So This augment is supposed to make Atlas the Rumbler. So when you cast your 4th ability, Atlas becomes a Rumbler with rock armor, granting overguard, and it absorbs up to 300% damage as health. I think this is genuinely pretty fine. I also would like it if, while as a Rumbler, he was maybe immune to status effects. I don't think that would make this ability busted at all, to be honest with you. It's a duration-based thing, you know? You forget about it, you might experience some bad times, but I don't see why that wouldn't be cool. He's already got overguard, so I think that's absolutely fine. I do think, though, to make this a little bit more cohesive, that maybe this should scale with armor as opposed to health, because Atlas is gaining armor from the rubble. Or I think more specifically, it should scale with rubble, maybe even more it should just scale with rubble, personally. Because while yes, we need to build health so the armor has something to work off of, he gains armor. So like, why wouldn't we use that mechanic? It's like what Atlas is, like the whole point of this is that he gains rubble and then that rubble makes him tankier and etc, etc. That's my take. At the very least, I think this ability should scale either off of rubble directly or off of just armor more generally. And I think then that would be pretty good. I think the interesting thing about having it scale off of health is that he's already getting armor, so people may not mod for armor, but that's maybe more of a nuanced discussion, and I don't know the ins and outs of that. I'm not an Atlas main. I'm also not that great at modding. I'm still learning. So that's a really interesting augment. It's a really interesting case for it. And interestingly then, how would that interact with like the bulwark system? Exactly the same. Whenever you run out of your duration, it creates a bulwark like right in front of you. Something like that. I think that'd be awesome. In any case, he's got another augment as well, which is really interesting. Titanic Rumbler modifies Rumblers to make one large Rumbler with more health, damage, melee range, and occasionally increases threat level instead of the normal 2 Rumblers. On recast, it taunts and slams the ground within 15 meters. Interesting. Very interesting. The problem is Atlas's Rumblers just aren't that strong. They aren't. And I think there's honestly a case to be made that Atlas's Rumblers should benefit from his Exalted Fists. I think maybe Atlas's Rumblers should have the same mods on them as the Landslide Fists do, potentially. But I think at the very least that this ability, this augment, should obtain some level of power similar to that. I think that's the purpose of this. So this is my proposed change for Augment 2. You summon one Rumbler, which by the way, I would like to actually be like substantially larger. I want this to be like a 13-foot tall dude. I want it to look like a Broly. So you summon one Rumbler. That Rumbler, instead of having all of this like increased health or increased damage and the slam ability, the Rumbler mimics every one of your abilities. When you Landslide Fist, it Landslide Fists. When you Bulwark, it Bulwarks. When you recast Bulwark, it recasts Bulwark. When you cast Petrify, it casts Petrify. That's what I want from this augment mod. I want a Rumbler that is a stand. I want to be a Joestar where I cast Landslide Fist and then my buddy slides up next to me and casts it again. Now you may think that's just completely unnecessary. You're already blowing apart everything. Okay, well maybe then, instead of it like targeting the same thing you target, it could target the nearest thing that it can target, or whatever it may be. But I think having a Rumbler that is literally just mimicking everything you do makes this augment mod and this ability so much better. So that's my take. That's everything I've got. We'll go through the few little things that I mentioned here. The passive ability being immune to knockdown, fine. I want to include that rubble is part of your passive. Like you generate rubble by defeating petrified enemies. That's what I want to say specifically. Landslide is great. It's got a 3-hit combo and its range is based on also the slide range as well. You've got Tectonics, which summon a Bulwark, which you can make rolling at people. When the Bulwark takes damage or rolls through things or explodes, it generates rubble, which heals Atlas, increases his armor. You've got Petrify. Petrify fossilizes enemies, increasing the damage they take. It also makes the Bulwark stronger. It'll heal or reset the duration of Rumblers. And if you destroy a petrified enemy, you get rubble, but we already know that from the passive ability. And then the rumblers, you summon 2 people who potentially benefit from the same mods as the landslide fists. Those rumblers, when they are defeated or the duration runs out, become a bulwark, a second ability, and you can then recast that to have it roll or whatever you may want to do. Maybe if you recast rumblers, it automatically just makes these roll as well. You could have that be an interaction. And that's Atlas. That's Atlas. And I think we've brought his kit together. I think his kit now makes more sense. He's not just the guy who has rumblers and like uses it. No, he's got a really cohesive design identity, and that's my opinion. So let me know how I did. Thank you so much for your time. Please be well. And yeah, the next video is going to be on Banshee, I think, or Chroma. I don't remember. No, it is Banshee. I have also done Chroma, but it is Banshee. So look forward to that. I will be going through these in alphabetical order. I don't own all Warframes, so I will not make comments on Warframes that I have not played myself, because I just don't feel comfortable with that. In any case, thank you guys so much for watching. Please stay well and stay safe. Look after yourself. Give me your own takes down in the comments below. Let me know what you think about my opinions. And without further ado, I will be leaving you. So I'll see you very, very soon. Look after yourself, and goodbye.